So good day, everyone. I hope you're all doing fine. So right now, we are going to discuss, in continuation for the previous pre-recorded video, the American and Japanese occupation. So right here, in this discussion, it's in chronological order. The dates are already highlighted so that it will be easier for you to study, the events in order na gid siya. So to start, so before the Battle of Manila in 1898, these are the events that happened. Okay, it's important that we know these things because um, for us to understand, no, the intent of the Americans to the Filipinos and the hopes of the Filipinos towards the Americans. Okay, so in April 22, 1898, the U.S. Asiatic Fleet under the Admiral Dewey anchored in the British port in Hong Kong or of Hong Kong. So in there, Aguinaldo and the Americans had a conversation and had an agreement. Okay, so in April 23, the U.S. Consul General Pratt of Singapore was informed by the arrival of Aguinaldo. So they telegraphed Aguinaldo, telegraph a letter of affirmation of Aguinaldo's allegiance to the Americans. Because right now, at this time, the Americans is already planning to attack Manila. Okay, so on April 24, they received the response of Dewey notifying Aguinaldo to come join him. Okay? So on April 25, Dewey was notified that he had begun and ordered to go to the Philippines and capture or destroy the Spanish vessels. The same day, Aguinaldo, he left Hong Kong due to British neutrality. I know Dewey left Hong Kong due to British neutrality and anchored at Mirs Bay in China. Okay, so in there, Dewey waited, no, for Aguinaldo. So on April 26, Aguinaldo sailed off going to Hong Kong with 30,000 insurgent as land troops for the US forces. On April 27, American squadron raised anchor and left Mirs Bay going to Manila without any Filipinos on board. Okay, so though Dewey and Aguinaldo had an agreement that they are going to be, together in this battle with against the Spaniards, but obviously Aguinaldo was left in shadows with regards to the plan of Dewey or with the Americans. So on May 1, on the same year, American squadron destroyed the antiquated Spanish fleet commanded by Admiral Patrocio Montojo in Manila Bay. So on May 2, Dewey notified Spanish Governor General that Manila, Hong Kong cable should remain neutral, but later they refused. Thus, Dewey dredged up and cut the cable, ending the direct flow of information out of the Philippines. So, since Dewey had no force which to occupy Manila nor to attack the city, so Dewey blocked the harbor and cabled Washington and asked for reinforcement. So on May 16, the Consul General Wildman of Hong Kong succeeded in getting Aguinaldo and his staff off for Manila on board the USS McCulloch. On May 19, Aguinaldo arrived in Manila and met with Dewey, and there they further discussed, on how they are going to go about with the battle that they are going to face, in Manila, that they are going to they are going to retake the 8 provinces that was under martial law, no, by the Spaniards. So on May 24, Aguinaldo proclaimed his revolutionary government and summoned the people for his purpose of driving the Spaniards out forever in the Philippines, in which Aguinaldo somehow succeeded in that mission when he returned. Okay, here in Aguinaldo's return, on May 29, Aguinaldo visited Dewey on board, stating his expectation to make general attack by May 31. And on May 31, Aguinaldo launched the attack and did not succeed entirely, but was able to draw a cordon to Spaniards' troops, trapping them inside Manila. So all of those 8 provinces, aside from Manila, was already in Aguinaldo's control. Okay, so what Aguinaldo was waiting for, why he did not raided Manila, is that he was really waiting for the Americans so that they are going to raid Intramuros together. Okay, now early June, Aguinaldo forces had overwhelmed Spanish garrisons in Cavite and around Manila. So surrounded the capital and kept the Spaniards inside Manila until American troop reinforcement could arrive. Okay, so Aguinaldo was really waiting for the reinforcement of from the Americans. So on June 12, Aguinaldo declared the independence of the Filipinos and the birth of the Philippine Republic under the protection of the North American Union. Okay, so when the U.S. infantry arrived in Manila, okay, that is still in the year 1898. Okay, so June 30, the first American infantry troops under Brigadier General Anderson arrived in Manila, and they started positioning the troops around Manila and secure the line of avoidance pending the arrival of General Merritt. Now on July 17 and 31, the second and third expedition under the Brigade General Greene and MacArthur respective arrived in Cavite Harbor. So on July 25, Major General Merritt arrived and took over the command of American troops, and together with Filipino insurgent battled against Spanish troops. So purposefully, Merritt and Dewey left Aguinaldo out of any plans and preparations regarding the capture of Manila, while Aguinaldo was still believing that they're in this together, no? Together with the Americans. So on August 4, Governor General Juadenes replaced the former Governor General and devised a way to salvage the honor of his country. So this is where the betrayal, no? Negotiations were carried out and a secret agreement was made, no, between the governor and the American military commanders concerning the capture of Manila. So Spaniards would put up only a show of resistance and on a prearranged signal would surrender. Okay, so it's a staged battle, kumbaga. So the Spanish feared that the Filipinos were plotting to massacre them all. And there was a great fear that if the city fell to Aguinaldo and his revolutionary forces, there would be hell to pay. Okay, so the Americans is somehow convinced in that kind of reasoning, no, coming from the Governor General. So on August 12, signing of peace protocols between American government and Spanish government. So on that day, though nahitabo na siya, no, ang signing sa peace protocols, unaware, no, ang Americans o ang Spaniards in the Philippines during that time. So on August 13, the mock battle in Manila was staged with American-Spanish commanders unaware that peace protocols had been signed few hours earlier before the battle commenced. So as the battle continued between American and Spain or the Spaniards, Filipinos came to join in and aid with the American forces unaware of the scripted battle. Okay, so grabe ka, kumbaga left in darkness gud ang mga Filipinos, that because they are excluded, no? So they don't know that the battle was staged, and their efforts and their intent, no, to save the country or to capture Manila was really pure, no, to fight the Spaniards, because the Spaniards has colonized the Philippines for more than 333 years. But we were being played, no, by the Americans. So the staged battle ended after General Merritt answered upon the request of 600 to 700 American troops inside Intramuros to protect Spanish troops from the Filipinos. So what happened in the mock battle is that Filipinos mo noon ang na-counter, no, sa on that battle. Okay? So the Americans on that battle good betrayed the Filipinos and joined forces with the Spaniards to defeat the Filipinos so that the Americans could protect the Spaniards. Okay? So that's what happened in the back battle in Manila. Okay. So after that, this is the start of the American occupation or American Occupy Manila in 1898. So August 13, General Merritt cabled U.S. Army Adjutant General, and according to the increasing demand of a joint occupation in Manila. So on August 17, Merritt received the following reply. The President directs that there must be no joint occupation with the insurgents, meaning with the Filipinos. The United States, in the position of Manila City, Manila Bay, and Harbor, must preserve the peace and protect persons and property within the territory occupied by their military occupation and authority of the United States, and the ceasation of hostilities proclaimed by the President. Use whatever means in your judgment are necessary to this end. All law-abiding people must be treated alike. Okay, so that's the reply of the President or the U.S. President. So on September 15, a Congress was opened to draw up a constitution for the first Philippine Constitution. So at this time, while Aguinaldo was planning to finalize his Philippine Constitution, he doesn't have knowledge, no, about the mock battle in Manila, that Filipinos who joined in that battle were betrayed. Okay, so on this day, no, he was able to draw up the first Philippine Constitution, and the Congress proceeded to elect its officers. So we have Pedro Paterno as the president of the Congress, and we have Benito Legarda as the vice president, and the Gregorio Araneta, the first secretary, and Pablo Ocampo as the second secretary. And on September 29, the Congress ratified the independence proclaimed in Kawit, Cavite on June 12, 1898 in Barasuin Church. Okay? So after the Malolos Convention, the Malolos Congress, the Treaty of Paris happened. October 1, 1898, American and Spanish delegates opened discussions in Paris to end the Spanish-American War. So on the same day at Washington, D.C., Philippine Ambassador Felipe Agoncillo and his secretary Sixto Lopez met with President William McKinley, but his request that Filipinos be represented at the Paris peace talks was rejected. So there was no Filipino representation in the Treaty of Paris. So December 10, the Treaty of Paris was signed, thus ending the Spanish-American War. Spain ceded the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico and Cuba, and was granted its independence. In return, the US paid Spain the sum of 20 million US dollars for the Philippines. So in Tagalog, no, pinagbili ang ng mga Spaniards or ng mga Espanyol ang Pilipinas, no, papunta sa mga Amerikano. Okay? So yun yung nangyari. And the Philippine-American War in 1899. So in February 4, hostilities broke after 2 American private on patrol killed 3 Filipino soldiers in San Juan, Manila. So this incident sparked the Philippine-American War, which would cost far more money and took far more lives than the Spanish-American War. So on March 31, revolutionary capital, Malolos, was captured, but Aguinaldo and his government escaped to San Isidro, Nueva Ecija. And on June 5, Antonio Luna was killed by Aguinaldo's guard in apparent assassination, all because of political reasons. Okay. So the Philippine-American War in 1899, so on November 12, Aguinaldo ordered a shift to guerrilla warfare, which brought out frustrations to the Americans to capture the said leader. Okay? So the remaining commanders and generals of Emilio Aguinaldo, together with them, no, they fled into the mountainous areas in Luzon. Okay, together with one of those governor general is Malvar and Gregorio del Pilar. Okay. So on December 2, Gregorio del Pilar was killed in the Battle of Terad Pass. Okay? So with his best commanders dead and his troops suffering continued defeats, Aguinaldo and his force was pushed further into the northern Luzon. So in February, on 1901, the capture of Aguinaldo, February 8, 6 Filipino soldiers, tired and famished guerrillas, surrendered at Pantabangan, Nueva Ecija, including Cecilio Sigismondo and Aguinaldo's messenger. Okay. Sigismondo pinpointed the village of Palanan in a mountainous Isabela province as Aguinaldo's headquarters and told Funston that there was no more than 50 guards at Palanan in defense for Aguinaldo. So on March 23, Aguinaldo was captured and brought to Manila. So convinced of the futility of further resistance, he swore allegiance to the United States and issued a proclamation calling on his compatriots to lay down their arms and officially bringing an end to the war. So in 1901, this is the start of the Philippines as a U.S. territory, 1901 to 1930s. So in 1901, civil government was established in the Philippines, proclaiming William Howard Taft as the first American governor, replacing the military governor Arthur MacArthur Jr. Okay. During also this year, this was the start of the education system campaign of the Americans. So at this year, diri pod sila nag-start o teach no, sa mga Filipinos on how to speak English and educated us, no, in general. So the Philippine Constabulary was organized to deal with the remnants of the insurgent movement and gradually assume the responsibilities from the US Army. In 1907, elected Philippine Assembly was inaugurated, becoming the lower house of the bicameral legislature with appointed Philippine Commission as the upper house. So our government system is actually built now by the Americans. Now we have the lower house, we have the upper house, and even until now, we still do follow that kind of government system. Okay? So in 1916, passage of Jones Act in which promised the eventual independence and instituted an elected Philippine Senate. So the Americans, when they came in the Philippines, they really made it clear that their intention was to give the independence to the Philippines once we are ready or ready enough to manage our own country. Hold on for a while. So under the US government, the Philippines gradually developed English language and became the official language of the land, and industrialization flourished. So aside from the Filipinos not being educated during the American occupation, our economy was also booming. Now that in fact, during the American occupation, the population increased, coming from the Spanish colonialization. Our number has gradually increased during the during the American occupation, stating that there is enough development, kanang explaining the rapid population growth. Okay? So in 1920s, alternation periods of cooperation and confrontation with American Governor General, depending on how intent the incumbent was on exercising his powers vis-a-vis the Philippine legislature. So member of the elected legislature lobbied for immediate and complete independence from the United States. So several independence missions were sent to Washington, D.C. Okay, so we were asking for the American senators to make a bill or to draft a bill that would give us a total independence coming from the Americans. Okay? And we were lucky enough that there were senators who were willing to sponsor a bill for us. That they are going to provide a bill or to draft a bill so that Filipinos would have the 100% independence. But aside from the kanabitang asking for independence coming from the Americans, there are also Filipinos who are kanang against it. They do not want the 100% independence yet, because in their perspective, it's too early for the Filipinos to ask for the 100% independence when dili pa ready ang mga Filipinos, like kulang pa sa pag-build sa government system, or maybe na ay mga benefits ang pagstay sa mga Americans here in the Philippines. That's why tutol sila sa 100% independence, because we will be left on our own if that happens. Okay? So the Commonwealth period, this is in 1930s to 1940s. So in 1933, the United States Congress passed the Hawes-Katting Act as a Philippine Independence Act. So this is the first act or bill that was passed in Congress so that to give us our full independence. So though the bill had been drafted with the aid of a commission from the Philippines, it was opposed by the Philippine Senate President Manuel L. Quezon, partially because of provisions leaving the United States in control of the naval bases under his influence, and the Philippine legislature rejected the bill. Okay, because Manuel L. Quezon did not support it. So in 1934, a revised act known as Tidings-McDuffie Act was finally passed. Okay? In 1935, a constitution was framed and approved by Franklin Roosevelt. And on May 14, 1935, a Filipino government was formed, the basic of principles similar to the US Constitution. Though they already have the Philippine government that all Filipinos lang ang nagdumala. You have Filipinos who are members of the Senate, the lower house and the upper house. You have the vice president and the president, all Filipinos. But the Commonwealth was established, electing Manuel L. Quezon as the president again. But the act provided for the establishment of the Commonwealth of the Philippines with a 10-year period for transition to full independence. So meaning the Americans are still in the country, supervising the first Philippine government, no, in the span of 10 years. So the Commonwealth would have its own constitution and be self-governing, though foreign policy would be the responsibility of the United States, and certain legislation required approval of the United States President. Okay, so clearly wala pa yun 100% full independence, but at least padung na dito after 10 years. So before nag 10 years, no, before ma-turn over yun ang full independence sa Philippines, Japanese invaded the country, no, in 1941. So on December 8, Japan launched a surprise attack on the Philippines hours after the attack on in Pearl Harbor. Okay? So the attack on Pearl Harbor was very strategic because the air forces are stationed there, no? The air forces of the Americans are stationed there. So when they bomb Pearl Harbor, all the planes and the helicopters and the air forces of the Americans were destroyed in that bombing. And when the Japanese attacked the Philippines, the Americans could not respond immediately. Okay, because they have been crippled in that bombing. So Japanese troops attacked the islands in many places and launched a pincer drive on Manila. So aerial bombardment was followed by landings of ground troops in Luzon. MacArthur's indecision, combined with his poor military judgment and slackness in his command structure, lead to the destruction of half of his air force on the ground and his troops being denied adequate supplies to withstand a lengthy siege. Okay, so all over the Philippines, there was a continuous bombing coming from the Japanese. Okay. So under the pressure of superior numbers, MacArthur and the defending forces withdrew to the Bataan Peninsula and to the island of Corregidor. At the entrance to Manila Bay, where they entrenched and tried to hold until the arrival of reinforcements. Meanwhile, guarding the entrance to Manila Bay and denying that important harbor to the Japanese, but there was no reinforcement, no, that were coming. So meanwhile, the Commonwealth governments seek refuge in the Corregidor Island. So in 1942, okay, so the fall of Bataan and Corregidor. Okay, March 1942, Quezon and Osmeña fled the country and went to Washington, D.C., carrying the Commonwealth government in exile, while MacArthur fled to Australia and promised to return. April 9, 1942, that's the fall of United States Philippine forces on the Bataan Peninsula. So on May 6, 1942, the final surrender of United States Philippine forces on Corregidor. Okay, so that's the kuan ba, sinuko na ang Bataan, no, on May 6, 1942. So after the surrender on April 9, 1942, um, Bataan death march happened. So most of the 80,000 prisoners of war captured by the Japanese at Bataan were forced to undertake the infamous Bataan Death March to a prison camp 105 kilometers to the north. It is estimated that as many as 10,000 men, weakened by disease and malnutrition and treated harshly by their captors, died before reaching their destination. Imagine 10,000 lives lost during the Bataan Death March. Okay? So in 1942 to 1944, the Japanese military authorities immediately began organizing a new government structure in the Philippines because they planned to occupy the Philippines. Okay, so they made a government structure immediately. So they initially organized a council of state through which they directed civil affairs. October 14, 1943, Japanese declared the Philippines an independent republic and headed by the President Jose Laurel. So this is puppet, a puppet government made by the Japanese. Okay? So most of the Philippine elite, with a few notable exceptions, serve under the Japanese. Philippine collaboration in Japanese-sponsored political institution, which later became a major domestic political issue, was motivated by several considerations. So among them was the effort to protect the people, no, from the harshness of Japanese rule, an effort that Quezon himself had advocated. So protection of family and personal interests and belief that Philippine nationalism would advance by solidarity with fellow Asians. So there was this one group was very effective in deflecting Japanese forces. So they are called the Hukbalahap or Hukbo ng Bayan laban sa mga Hapon. So they are one major resistance group in the Central Luzon area was furnished by the Hooks or the Hukbalahap or the People's Anti-Japanese Army. They are organized in early 1942 under the leadership of Luis Taruk, a Communist Party member since 1939. Okay. So, on October 20, 1994, 1944 rather. Sorry, I typed it wrong. MacArthur Allied forces landed in the island of Leyte, accompanied by Osmeña, who had succeeded to the Commonwealth presidency upon the death of Quezon on August 1, 1944. So Quezon supposedly was to continue his presidency, but he died. So because Osmeña was the vice president, so he took over. So landings in other parts of the country followed. Okay, and the associates pushed towards Manila. So the landing was followed on October 23 to 26. So by the greatest naval engagement in history, called variously the Battle of Leyte or the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the Second Battle of the Philippine Sea. Okay, when during the return of the Americans in the Philippines. So the end of Japanese occupation. In 1945, January 1945, Luzon was invaded by MacArthur forces and Manila was taken in February. On July 5, 1945, MacArthur announced all the Philippines are now liberated. So one of the major factor why the Japanese surrendered in this battle is the bombing in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Okay, the nuclear bombs. So when that bomb was or landed in in their country, so the Japanese was scared of another bomb to be dropped, and they stopped all their military activities right after that. No, on September 2, 1945, Japan's formal surrender to the U.S. forces. Okay, so the Japanese had suffered over uh four 425,000 dead in the Philippines, and the Philippines suffered great loss of life and monstrous physical destruction by the time the war was over. An estimated 100 million Filipinos, or not 100 million, sorry, 1 million Filipinos had been killed, and Manila was extensively damaged. So that is the casualty of war. It is a great US victory. It effectively destroyed the Japanese Navy and opened the way for the recovery of all the islands. So right after the Indo-Pacific War or the World War II ended, the Americans gave the 100% full independence to the Philippines. So they granted it to the Philippines. And that's the start of the Third Philippine Republic, and which will be our next topic. So for now, that's it. No, that's the end of our discussion. So hopefully next week we will be able to do live meetings already. At this week kay natimingan kita sa event, no? Founders Day na duha ka adlaw ay klase, and then we have the holiday. Okay, so we don't have a time for us to meet in a live meeting. So maybe next week we'll do that. Okay, so see you all next week. Take care everyone.